Hey there everybody, and welcome to this edition of Perspective Check. I'm Steve Weissman, the InfoGov guy, and I'll be your host as we talk about anticipation. You know, that feeling that you get while you wait for the ketchup to drip from the bottle to the French fries. Well, that's the same feeling I get when I look ahead to the turn of a new year. So here we are, 2019, and the first thing I want to talk to you about is metadata and database fields. Now, I know these are subjects that have been covered to death by me and by others, but what's happening is somewhat unique in that these labels of information are now being orchestrated in ways to do much more than find stuff once you capture it. The same basic disciplines are now being used for everything from findability to discovery to preservation. And it's fascinating to me how the focus surrounding this is now becoming more on the application than it is on the technology. Now, there is a technology component to this, of course, and a very important one, but there is a caveat, and I want to bring that up right now, and I want you to think about this pretty much every day until we meet again for the Perspective Check leading into 2020. And that is this conflation of artificial intelligence and machine learning. All of these tools, and I think all of these tools, not just sort of the generic, well, all of these things. No, I think all of them use some form of machine learning or artificial intelligence, or in fact, some combination thereof to work their magic. The problem is there are many that are using machine learning but calling it artificial intelligence. And it's vitally important that you understand that these two things are not the same things. They make for great marketing copy. They're both very popular buzz phrases, and like so many other turns of phrases in the past, compliance, there's a million of them, of course. You want to be careful that you understand what you're looking at, or you may end up being sold a bill of goods. Doesn't mean that one or the other is bad. In fact, they're both highly effective and highly valuable depending how you deploy them. But you need to understand that artificial intelligence is not the same thing as machine learning. Machine learning is more, if you will, better and better pattern matching. Not doing it justice, but it's not really enhancing its knowledge of the outside world or of your information. But it is highly valuable when it comes to dealing with more or less the same things on a volume basis. But there's no inherent intelligence there the way we think of it. Similarly, I want to flap my arms and wave you off of falling in love with the phrase RPA, robotic process automation. For to me, I have a hard time distinguishing between that and what we used to call workflow or business process management. Again, there's nothing wrong with it, but it is, I fear, running the risk of becoming just so much marketing pap that's going to divert people away from the issues that they really need to be focusing on, which is the nature of the business problem that they're trying to solve. If you've been following me for any length of time, you know that's my favorite mantra, and that's only because it's the only one that can assure your success in the long term. Now, speaking of marketing pap, there's blockchain. I love blockchain. I did an interview with Alan Pell-Sharp a number of months ago where we talked about the incredible potential of this technology to perhaps even do away with records management as we know it. It's a great tool. It's being used to tremendous effect already. There's a long way to go, but at the same time, remember, like these other things we've been talking about, there are plenty of vendors out there who are going to start waving the blockchain flag because it's almost guaranteed to capture your attention, and you don't want to fall into that trap. It's early, it's expensive, it's complicated, but it's also highly valuable. But again, only if it's suited to solve the business problem that you're confronting. It all starts with that. The technologies, as the t-shirts say, really are just details. Highly critical to ensuring your success, but they are the fine edge on the sword. You have to understand what you're waving that sword at first if you want to end up with the result that you're chasing. Now let's talk a moment about GDPR, the European privacy regulation that's out there now. I'm hesitating because there's a little voice in my head that says, no, you have to call it the GDPR, not just GDPR. But either way, it's going to be one of the biggest deals out there, especially now that there are cases beginning to be litigated to prosecute firms that are not doing the right thing with the privacy information they maintain. Now here in the US, there's a part of me that fears it's going to be another one of those, marketing distractions, even though it is beginning to spark regulation on the state level, most notably in California at this recording, that are geared towards the same protections. We all know that if we use, as I do, the applications in the Google Cloud or Microsoft or Amazon, we give them our lives. I mean, let's face it. As I blogged recently, they know more than Santa. They know when we're awake and asleep and bad and good, but they know what we eat. They know how we pay for things. They know how regularly we reorder vitamins. It's a little bit scary. And while GDPR has sort of put the fine point on it in Europe, I do think we can expect to see that here in the States, although probably not for a little while yet. So be cognizant, but don't get all aflutter because, oh, we're not GDPR compliant, because most people, most organizations, I dare say most regulators on this side of the Atlantic can't even spell GDPR quite yet. Don't do things foolishly. Be prepared that you're going to be held accountable at some point. But if you take that approach now, chances are you won't have problems later. Okay, enough of the be careful of this, watch out for that. Let's talk about a couple of trends now that are worthy of adopting or accelerating if you're already on these paths. The first of these is to focus on your applications, not the technologies. We hit upon this already when we talked about metadata and the ability to use all the different data tags and labels, structured and unstructured, in order to help do a plethora of things. But yet, I still see a lot of RFPs, too many RFPs, that are written in terms of, oh, you must have depth of knowledge in OnBase, in Laserfish, in OpenText. And again, that's critical. At the end of the day, you're going to require that these technologies execute upon the plans that you've laid. But until and unless you know what those plans are, that where you want to go, that you have that roadmap in place, which tool you're focused on is almost besides the point. Because you want to make sure that whatever tool you do settle on, or you have and want to optimize, you want to make sure that it really can do the job for you. So our approach is to kind of look at both together when we draw that roadmap. We look at what the future state is that our client desires, and we work backwards from there to figure out what are the steps necessary organizationally, informationally, technologically, embracing existing technologies to facilitate the move from what you have today to what you desire in the future. Applications first, not technology. What's the business problem you're trying to solve? Not what's the tool you're going to use to solve it. We'll get there, but it's not first. Okay, similarly, I'd really love it if you guys would start telling me that you're thinking about obsolescence. Did a bit of research earlier in 2018 to find out just where people are in their thinking regarding the aging out of their existing technologies. And it was terrifying to discover that so many's attitude was, we'll deal with it when we get there. To me, that's horrifying, because when you get there, it's going to be too late. You're going to be under pressure for time. It's going to be wickedly expensive. And it may not work. The system may simply crumble, and now you're stuck. I mean, think about it. If you were in the first wave, certainly, but even second, maybe even third, depending how you count, wave of content management technology, your solution's 10 years old or more. That's old. Doesn't mean it doesn't work, but what it means is if you haven't upgraded it, you need to. What it means is the people who initially developed the applications may have long since retired or moved on. You need to replace those skill sets. You need to be thinking about what you're going to do when the wheels finally do come off, because they are going to come off, and probably sooner than later. So I hate the idea of you sort of huddling in, buried under your day-to-day work, only to have that tsunami of emergency descend upon you, probably within a couple of years. So be prepared. The good news there is, and again, I'm back to the metadata and database field, tagging, labeling kind of thing, because using those tools and those techniques to improve the care and feeding of your information in the way you should be anyway, to ensure its quality and its accuracy and the fact that it's not redundant and all that good stuff, is really what you do when you're starting to plan to migrate anyway. Because there's no sense migrating all the junk. So in an ideal world, you want to do the cleanup first and only migrate or upgrade the good stuff. So starting with that discipline today not only does you well for the near future, but also the further future. Because as I just noted, you're going to have to do something sooner rather than later anyway. Okay, second to last item. It's going to sound painfully obvious, and that's okay. I put it on the list because it is painfully obvious, and yet somehow gets missed more often than I would like to see. And that is, as we focus on information security, please don't forget that a big chunk of success there has to do with physical security, not just cybersecurity. You have to lock the office doors. You have to encrypt the USB drives. All these different things that sound so elementary. And really, I guess they are elementary. But why then do we read stories constantly about breaches that happen not because somebody hacked their way into your system, but because somebody walked into your office and left with things that they shouldn't? Happens all the time, and yet we fixate on the need to control access and all that good stuff. Still need to do that good stuff, but let's not skip the physicality of the issue along the way. And then finally, I just want to remind you that there ain't nothing wrong with some good old-fashioned scanning. This is a plus, I think, whereas before it was a negative. How many RFPs that we get that still have scanning and capture at their core. And a lot of times the people that we work with are almost apologetic about it because it seems so basic and the technologies are so commodity. And I reassure them, because the reason you read about things like artificial intelligence and machine learning and a blockchain, they're in the headlines because they're new, because not everybody's doing them. And even for those companies that are implementing those leading edge technologies, they're not going to get any value out of those unless they have first captured information of quality in an efficient way, in a cost-effective way, in a way that allows them to put information into their solutions that's already been validated, that's already been tagged, that's already been prepped to return value when the next applications come along to do something with it. Could be business intelligence, could be e-discovery, it could be anything, could be everything, as we've touched on. It all starts with simply getting that information off paper and into the solution. The vast majority of information we deal with is still on paper. The stuff that's born digital, you're halfway there. But don't be ashamed, don't be embarrassed, don't be abashed. If what you need is to get rid of the boxes of paper that are cluttering your office corridors, you're not alone, and it all starts there. So that's what I have for you today. Gone on a bit longer perhaps than I liked, but I hope there's some value there for you. While everybody else is looking ahead to the latest and greatest technologies, and they are the latest and greatest, I don't want you to become enamored and distracted by those developments and lose sight of what's really important to you in the 12 months ahead. And what that is to do information right, is to take the conceptual step backwards as you need to figure out what it is that you're really trying to accomplish, and then how to marshal all these other resources, organizational and technological, to meet your needs. And with that, I wish you a very happy new year, and we'll see you next time.